Let's quickly go over null, undefined, and NaN. Firstly, null. Null is just a reference that points to an empty or invalid object. Now, I'm going to show you a few things in Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to be using a plugin or a piece of software called Quokka. And it just allows us to see immediate JavaScript results instead of having to console log it all the time, which we can do in JSON bin or even Google Chrome. What I'm talking about is if you click on extensions, just type Quokka. And there it is, live scratchpad for JavaScript. Install that, and then you push Ctrl-Shift-P, or you bring up the menu, and you can just search for Quokka new file. It's a JavaScript file, and now we can start typing JavaScript. How cool is this? Okay, so let's get into null. There's a bit of a bug in JavaScript because remember null is a primitive value. But if you go type of, let's just console log type of null, actually comes back as an object. And that's weird. It should come back as the type null because null is a primitive data type. But anyway, that's just a JavaScript bug. And the fact that we can see object here, that's what Quokka is doing. It's allowing us to see the immediate results instead of us having to go to the console, open it up and have a look. So it's just convenient for testing. The other thing with null is in basic maths, null is always coerced to the number 0 in JavaScript. So here's an example, console.log, let's just go 1 plus null is 1. We can go 5 plus null is 5. What about null less 10 is just negative 10. So you can see null is just being replaced by the number 0. And then one more thing about null is if you negate null, and you'll see later more details of how all this works, but negation is just something that's the opposite of true. So that's the exclamation mark. So if we negate null, we get true. But what's kind of weird is if we go null, is that equal to false? It's also not true. So it's a bit odd. You just got to learn how to deal with it. But I mean, if you negate null, you do get true. Okay, and one more example with null. I know you're probably over this. Say we had a person object. Let person, and we're going to get into objects in shortly in the next section. Let person name Wally and age 41. If you just type out person, Quokka actually allows you to see what your object is. Quite handy. But what we could do is we could actually make person equal null if we wanted to erase all that data. Now, when you type out person, it is literally gone to null. So that's null. Let's now get on to the second type I want to chat to you about, and that is undefined. Firstly, let me illustrate. What about if we console log A? And we haven't even defined A yet. We haven't put it in speech marks, so it's not text. It's not like we're doing this. This would be valid if we just put it in quotation marks. It'll literally give us back A. But here we're not saying it's a string. Here we're saying it's a variable because we're just placing A without quotation marks. You're going to get a type reference error thrown to you from JavaScript. And that's going to throw you an error saying A is not defined. Well, of course it's not defined. We haven't said what it is. So let's define A. Let's go variable A. And here you can see the undefined. And the reason it's undefined is that we've initiated a variable called A, but it doesn't have a value yet. It's like you getting a car without a color. So your car is kind of undefined. You haven't yet initiated it with a color. You haven't yet assigned it with a color. And what about doing maths with undefined? Well, it's not going to work. Let's try do a plus 10. You're just going to get not a number. Remember with null, we could do math operations. It would just be translated into 0. Here, you're not allowed doing it. It will always just give you NaN. The next question you're probably asking is null the same as undefined? Well, you can already tell they're a little bit different. But from a value point of view, JavaScript actually does treat them the same. And I'll prove that to you now. Let's get rid of this. Let's get rid of that. And let's go console log null equals undefined, and you get true. But with double equals, it tests values. In JavaScript, if you put 3 equals, it actually tests the type as well, and you can see that that is false. And of course it's false. We know that null and undefined are different. They're different primitive value types. So they're not equal to each other. And finally, third topic, NaN. Let's quickly chat about that. Firstly, NaN is a property of the global window object. NaN is the same as number.nan. Those two are exactly the same. And by definition, NaN stands for not a number. And it just means something that cannot be represented as a number. As an example, console log sausage times 10. That doesn't make any sense at all, and that's why it produces NaN, not a number. And remember how I said NaN is part of the number object? Well, if we go type of NaN, it's a number. And we just saw that before when it was part of the number object. And one more thing with NaN, it's considered to be unordered. That means it cannot be less than, cannot be greater than, cannot be equal to anything, even itself, which is a bit strange. But have a look here. I'll prove that to you now. NaN less than 1 is false. What about greater than 1? False. What about if we go equals itself? False. Isn't that strange? I found that very strange. If it's never equal to itself, how do you ever test whether something is not a number? Well, luckily JavaScript has provided us with an inbuilt function called isNaN. So how that works is console log isNaN, NaN. And there you go. That is true. And that, my friends, is NaN. And now, for a quick summary, let's just go over those 3 things very quickly again. 1. Null. Null, we saw, is a primitive data type, although JavaScript has a bug because when you go type of null, it tells you it's an object. And when you perform arithmetic operations on null, it translates null into 0, and you can treat that as a 0 number. Null just means nothing. That's null. 2. Undefined. Undefined, as we saw, is when you declare a variable, but you haven't yet assigned it a value. And undefined, you cannot use in maths. It'll just become an NaN, not a number. Which brings us to not a number. Not a number is, as what it says, it's something that cannot be converted into a number. And luckily for us, JavaScript has provided us with an inbuilt function called isNaN, which allows you and I, to actually test whether the value we're working with is a number or not. Hope this helps. Let's move on.